London calling to the faraway towns. Now war is declared and battle come down. London calling to the underworld. Come out of the cupboard, you boys and girls.
And finally tonight, a guest in the studio. A man with a book out, but he's not a man on a book selling tour. Those are two different things. That's what you get on Jonathan Ross in the middle of a Saturday night, and they have got nothing to say. This is different. It's Barry McGuigan with his book Cyclone, My Story. Now, I seem to have read a couple of Barry McGuigan books already, Barry, but this one, well, I can throw the other ones away now, can't I? This is the only one.
This is the only one. The one that you're referring, the ones that you're referring to. The first one was written by Jim Sheridan, who also was the director, producer, and Hollywood, one of the top guys in Hollywood. He wrote and directed My Left Foot, In the Name of the Father, The Field, The Boxer. And I was involved in The Boxer with Daniel Day-Lewis, and he wrote my book, but it was his perspective on my life, not mine.
A nice book,
and a really good book, but and it done very well. Then the other one was about the Vegas, and we can't talk about that because that was taken off the shelves. It really revolved around the controversy of Vegas and the untold story, so that was taken off the shelves. But this is my story. This is I done it myself. 100 hours of interviews, and working with an editor and rewriting it twice to get it right.
Wow. Did you enjoy doing it?
I loved it. I loved it. I mean, and it's a sort of a cathartic, if you like, therapy, because going back and looking through those times and you know, the exaltation of Pedrosa and Laporte and the build up to that, and getting American TV on board, and they're coming home after the amazing night of Pedrosa and in Belfast and Dublin, and then of course the hugely emotional part of losing my dad at 52 and my brother at 34 and committing suicide, and you know, all of that stuff. So going through all of that was actually quite good for me.
The stuff that most intrigued me, I mean, that stuff's great, but I sort of know bits about that.
You know
I know about Laporte and stuff, and you know, I think what we're getting here, I know what I'm getting here is a definitive voice. But the stuff that really got me was the stuff I could really associate with those 70s years, those amateur years, sparring with Sutcliffe, being involved in those European tournaments. And the other thing that really got me, and I'd like you to talk about if you can, is what it must have been like. You talk about the Troubles quite a lot in there, thankfully, because so many people, Irish sportsmen and women, talking about their history tend to avoid any mention of the Troubles, even if they were right in the thick of it. And I think, and you're brilliant on the Troubles. And the thing that got me is, what was it like boxing in Belfast in the mid to late 70s?
Well, I want to give you I give you an inside story, right? We boxed East Germany in the Shankill Men's Working Club in East Belfast, and I was a Catholic from the south, right? And we boxed East Germany, and they just trounced the Irish senior team in Dublin and came up to Belfast. And Jerry Story, whose brother was, you know, a top man in the IRA and all of that sort of background, they give him an assurance. The loyalists gave him an assurance that we would be treated really, really well. They would cordon off 1,000 metres around the Shankill Men's Working Club and make sure that all of the parking, they had hard men on every corner, right? And the East Germans came in. I was treated like royalty. It was unbelievable. And I beat a guy called Torsten Koch, who later went on to win a world bronze medal at light welterweight, and he was 6 feet tall and he was a bantamweight. It was like Luke Campbell, you know, incredible. And I boxed this guy, and then afterwards there was a group called Club Sound, and my father sang with the band Club Sound, right? And what I learned afterwards, you know, here we have now, we'll fast forward to 2011, and I meet Carl Frampton, who I'm managing and promoting. I meet his granddad, who was in the Shankill Men's Working Club that very night. And he said his job was to take the guns off people when they went through the door. Right? And he said this guy, who later turned out to be one of the biggest loyalist murderers and terrorists, came running out and said, "Give me back my gun." That so-and-so, Barry McGuigan's father's up on the stage singing, "I want to kill him." and they got him and grabbed him and threw him out of the club. Now that's what it was like. And travelling through the north, you know, you had road stops, and I remember coming home. This is the truth. This is how I stopped. I started off in the Wattle Bridge Amateur Boxing Club, and there were 2 ways to go to the club. It was right on the border. You could go out the south and you would go through, it won't mean anything to people, but I've got to explain it. You would go 5 miles out to Scott's House, 4 miles across the back road towards Wattle Bridge, or you could do, that was a 9-mile cycle, or you could do a much shorter route which was out the unapproved roads, and would carry my blown up roads and barricades. I would carry my bike through the barricades and carry it through the rivers and walk across the rivers and get the other side, but it was half the journey, so I would take it. And that was until one night in November 1973, and there'd been a number of murders along the border. And what would happen is the army, the bad boys would say, oh, there's a booby trap out at such and such a place. So the army would then be flown in, and the police would be flown in, dropped, and they would run with maybe 9 guys or 7 or 8 guys to where they thought this was. And often they were booby traps, so were bombs, and they would detonate them from a distance and attack them or whatever. So they were on high alert. So this night, me and my old friend, God rest him, he died. He took his own life back in the mid-70s, a guy called Noel McGovern. We were cycling home, and we had no lights on the bike, no nothing. And I was coming down this steep road, and we came down this steep hill and round a hairpin bend at the bottom, and we were flying, no lights on the bikes, nothing, and old rickety bikes flying. The next time we came round the corner, and these army guys were there with little red infrared lights on the ends of the gun. Well, what? And we, honest to God, I don't know how we weren't killed, we weren't shot, but they slapped me around the head, and I let them. I didn't retaliate. They said, you shouldn't be on this road, you blackguard, get off the road, don't ever come here again. And there were 2 guys that they'd found in the hedge murdered, and they were lying on, these 2 bodies were lying. So by the time I got home, my mother knew that I took this road, and she said, were you on that road? No, I said, I know you were. No way you're going back out to that club. So that was the end of my.
So you joined another club.
So joined the other club 6 miles south of the border. But that's what it was like, and it was terrifying going up and down the north roads because you didn't know what was round the next corner, and it was. I mean, there were murders happening everywhere, and we were petrified. In fact, we were so worried in 1975 that they asked us, instead of taking part in the Ulster Championships, we asked to take part in the Leinsters. And we boxed in the Leinsters, and I boxed in the tournament before the Leinster called the Golden Shamrocks, and I knocked out the 5 times All-Ireland champion, and it was my first breakthrough, and I was going in for the Leinsters, and then all the other clubs objected, so I'd missed the Ulsters and then missed the Leicesters, so I had to wait for another year. But that's what it was like, and and Jerry Story was such an amazing guy. Jerry Story had no politics, no swearing, none of that sort of stuff, and he lived in
still runs a club now.
Still runs a club, and he's a god of Irish boxing. I mean, he really is. And here's a guy, and you know this, and you talk about it all the time, Bunsey. Here's a guy who gave 50, 60 years of his life. He's now 77 years old. He gave his whole life to boxing and never got a penny out of it, and is still deeply involved.
Still there.
He's still involved.
5 Olympians. It's something like 5 Olympians.
Incredible guy. And these are the guys that deserve this sort of respect, and these are the guys that I pay some homage to in the book.
A lot of homage to, in fairness. I mean, the opening, the early chapters, I found incredibly, really fascinating, because I knew some of the venues and I knew all of the fighters.
Of course, you were there.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing. I want to know how you managed to fight Sutcliffe.
Yeah.
If you were 2 years older than him, I was trying to work that.
He was almost 2 years older than me, right? But in those, you see, nowadays people don't realise, and I always say to mothers who want the kids who want to get involved in boxing, I say get involved in it. It's just very safe. You're not allowed to take on anybody who's older than you, or more than a year, or more than 2 kilos heavier, a kilo and a half. So unless that's agreed, so it's very safe. But in those days, I mean, my first fight, I remember my very first fight, it was a guy called Ronan McManus, and he'd had 3 fights, and I came in, and I had a pair of gutties, as we call, old running shoes, and a string vest, and a pair of ridiculous looking shorts, in my very first fight in the Luxor Cinema in Clones. And Davy Campbell said, in his he said, I have a young lad here, put him up against your fella. So he put him up against me.
So look, back to back.
Yeah, back to back, roughly the same size. That'll do rightly. No, he could have been a stone heavy.
It doesn't make any difference.
He was a similar size. That was it.
Because the reason why I think that whole situation there with the Troubles is so fascinating, or maybe that's not the right word, but of course within 10, 12 years, you're uniting not just the city, Belfast, you're uniting the rest of the country, and they're coming out, they're stopping what they do. They're doing what they do for Manny Pacquiao in the Philippines, where nothing happens during that hour or 2 hours.
It was amazing. And let me just finish that Sutcliffe story. I boxed Sutcliffe in a place called Eden Derry just before he entered the Irish Senior Championships at light flyweight. I just won the juveniles at 7 stone 7, so he was effectively the same weight.
Sure.
But he was 19 and I was almost 19 and I was 16. So we boxed in Eden Derry, and it was a very close fight. To be honest, I was lucky to get it, and he was fantastic. And then I went to spar him, and Jerry Story was playing a big part of my career. He then said to me, look, come on, I want you to do collective training, we need a sparring partner. And we sparred like flat out for about 3 weeks before he went to the Europeans and got to the final and boxed a guy called Alex Średnicki, the Polish world champion at light flyweight. Fought him in the semi-finals and won a bronze medal and pushed him very close. But again, talking about going back to what you're saying, Steve, Jerry Story made a major impact on me and had a very significant impact on me as a professional fighter. And I wanted to bring that philosophy that he had: no politics, doesn't matter where you come from, no bad language, nothing. And when I turned pro, I had a decision to make, because while I was an amateur, I could box for Northern Ireland because I was the Ulster champion. Sure. But as a pro, I had to take out a British passport. And that was a different thing altogether. And then as an Irishman, I had to take out a British passport and fight for the British title, and then marrying my wife, who was an Ulster Protestant. I'm a Southern Catholic, and it was a whole mishmash of stuff and decisions and that we made that were very, very serious.
But there was no great backlash, was there? I mean,
no,
I know
there was no backlash.
I know you were worried about it at the time. And then it wasn't until you lost. Was it when you lost the title, when you had that guy shout at you in the car?
In the car.
Which you almost couldn't believe you were hearing it. It was like the first time you'd heard it.
Exactly. I mean, I in the whole way through my career, the support I got from both sides was phenomenal. You know, the Falls Road Barry McGuigan Supporters Club, the Shankill Road Barry McGuigan Supporters Club. Now, these guys never associated with each other. They travelled away off together. They came to my fights in the King's Hall. They'd have a drink beforehand, and it was like a truce. It was like a truce.
Yeah.
Then they would go back to their own.
It was a truce. I mean, it was
amazing.
You know what I didn't do about it? There's a book called Lost Lives. Have you ever seen this book? It was put together by David McGoldrick, I think, who works for The Independent. What it is, it's basically tiny obituaries of every single person that's died in the Troubles, and they update it every couple of years. It's about 1,100 pages long, but it's brilliantly written, and it's short little obits. And I haven't checked the dates, but I'd like to check the dates of your fights. I'm telling you, I'm going to check the dates of your fights.
Yeah, there wasn't much activity in those days.
If ever you're in a shop,
I must look at
Lost Lives. It's quite unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's more than fascinating. Yeah. Now let's. I'm going to throw it forward, and we're going to go through. I'm going to avoid some of the early pro stuff. Yeah.